3 gunshots echoed inside the courtroom today, not from a weapon, but from Kelly Khumalo's own lips, as she admitted pulling the trigger on Senzo Meyiwa. In the next minutes, we'll uncover the moment that turned the trial into chaos, the chilling confession that froze even the judge, and the ripple effect that could alter South African legal history. If you were in that courtroom, would you have shouted in outrage or sat in silence? Tell me, what does justice look like when the truth finally erupts? The day began like any other session in this long, grinding trial. Lawyers shuffled papers. The prosecution reviewed their witness list, and the defense prepared for another day of arguments. Then, in the middle of routine questioning, Kelly Khumalo's voice cut through the air, steady, unshaken, and unmistakable. "I shot him 3 times." The words didn't seem real at first. Even the court stenographer hesitated, as if questioning whether to type them. In that instant, years of speculation hardened into undeniable fact, and the case shifted onto an entirely new track. At first, there was silence, like the entire room forgot to breathe. Then it began. Sharp gasps, muffled cries, and the rustling of bodies shifting in disbelief. Some people clutched their chests. Others shouted so loudly their voices cracked. A woman in the front row sobbed uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking. It was a kind of collective reaction, usually seen after a verdict is announced. Not during testimony. Yet here it was, raw and uncontrolled, a perfect reflection of the nation's own shock spilling into one crowded chamber. In the South African legal system, few things carry as much weight as an unambiguous confession delivered under oath in open court. This wasn't whispered to a journalist or hinted at in a late-night interview. It was said directly in the presence of a judge. Prosecutors know that such statements can be devastating for the defense, especially if they align with physical evidence already on record. In this case, the timing was critical, coming just as the state was struggling to cement certain points of their argument. Suddenly, they didn't need to prove every detail. The accused had handed them the most powerful piece of evidence imaginable. Judge Ratha's reaction was immediate. His gavel slammed down repeatedly, the wooden sound echoing against the high courtroom walls, each strike more forceful than the last. He ordered silence, his voice cutting above the noise, but the uproar was impossible to contain. Courtrooms are designed to be places of order where procedure trumps passion. But this was different. This was history being rewritten in real time. The judge's face betrayed a rare combination of shock and urgency, his eyes darting from the witness stand to the chaotic gallery, aware that the trial had just changed forever. To understand why today's moment hit so hard, you have to go back to 2014. Senzo Meyiwa, captain of the national soccer team and a beloved figure, was shot dead in a house in Vosloorus. The incident was initially reported as a botched robbery, but inconsistencies piled up. Over the years, accusations, counter-accusations, and theories swirled, many pointing toward those inside the house, including Kelly Khumalo. The case dragged on, mired in procedural delays and public frustration. For almost 10 years, the truth remained elusive until today, when it emerged without warning in a few simple, devastating words. Before this confession, the state's case had leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence. Cell phone tower data, forensic ballistics, and conflicting witness testimonies. None of it was conclusive enough on its own to erase all doubt. But now, with her own voice tying herself to the act, those fragmented pieces suddenly formed a complete picture. Prosecutors could practically feel the tide turning in their favor, their years of preparation finally anchored by something no defense could easily dismantle, an open acknowledgement of guilt. She didn't break down in tears or tremble as she spoke. Instead, Kelly's posture was unervingly steady, her gaze unfocused as if she were addressing the air rather than any person in particular. Her voice was low but carried across the room with precision, each word pronounced without hesitation. Observers later described it as eerie, a confession without remorse, or perhaps without energy left to hide. It was as though the weight of years had finally forced the words out, not in panic, but in weary surrender. Senzo's family members, who had sat through years of hearings, broke down almost instantly. His mother cried out in anguish, her voice piercing the din, while his brother shouted curses through gritted teeth. Relatives clung to one another as security officers stepped in, unsure whether to comfort or restrain. This was not just a legal milestone. It was an emotional detonation. For them, the trial had always been about finding peace. Now, with the truth spoken aloud, peace felt both closer and impossibly far away. Within moments of the confession, reporters sprinted out of courtroom, some clutching their phones to their ears, while others were already live-streaming updates. Outside, camera crews swarmed the courthouse steps, microphones ready to catch reactions from anyone who had been inside. News tickers across major networks lit up in bold red, broadcasting the breaking headline: Kelly Khumalo admits shooting Senzo Meyiwa. Social media feeds flooded with short clips, quotes, and raw footage of the uproar. The world beyond those courtroom walls was learning about the confession in real time, and within minutes, the story had eclipsed nearly every other headline in the country. For some witnesses, this confession was a turning point they hadn't anticipated. Those who had once hesitated to speak, perhaps out of fear, loyalty, or uncertainty, were suddenly rethinking their silence. The legal team knew this could spark a ripple effect, encouraging reluctant individuals to finally come forward or, conversely, making others withdraw entirely, afraid of being drawn deeper into a case that had just exploded in the public eye. Conversations in hushed tones began to circulate in courthouse hallways, whispers about who might be called back to the stand, and whether their earlier statements could now change entirely. For years, the defense had maintained a consistent front. Kelly was not the shooter, she wasn't responsible, and the state had no definitive proof. This narrative had been woven into every press statement, cross-examination, and legal motion. But with her own words contradicting years of denials, the defense's carefully constructed wall of arguments now lay in ruins. The implications were severe. Previous testimonies that supported her innocence could now be viewed as misleading, even perjurious. The defense table was visibly shaken, attorneys leaning into urgent, whispered conversations as they recalculated their entire strategy on the spot. Within hours, international media outlets picked up the story, broadcasting Kelly Khumalo's confession far beyond South Africa's borders. Major news channels in Europe, North America, and Africa covered the courtroom eruption with live updates, interviews, and expert analysis. Sports networks highlighted the shocking loss of a national captain, while legal commentators debated the ramifications of an open confession. The world was watching a moment that had been years in the making, and every detail was scrutinized. From Johannesburg to New York, people were talking, sharing, and replaying the courtroom footage, proving that this case was no longer just local. It had become global. Now, the trial enters its final act. With guilt clearly established, the focus will shift from proving facts to determining appropriate punishment. Legal teams are preparing for high-stakes arguments, while the public watches with anticipation, knowing that a verdict will likely bring decades of unresolved tension to a head. The courtroom that once echoed with uncertainty now resonates with the weight of consequence. Kelly Khumalo's words have set history in motion, and the nation waits for justice to take its course. Kelly Khumalo's confession didn't just alter the course of trial. It ripped the lid off nearly a decade of speculation, silence, and legal maneuvering. In a few unshaken words, she changed the way history will remember this case, turning whispered doubts into undeniable fact. The echoes of that moment will follow every proceeding from here on, leaving South Africa watching, waiting, and bracing for the final judgment.